Greg, how are things going today?
It's a bit snowy for the first day of spring.
Yeah, it is. That's when we're recording episode 30. It's probably not when
the equinox.
Yeah, and I didn't even realize it was the first day of spring until I read that somewhere. But yeah, 5 to 8 centimeters of snow and heavy snow. That really heavy stuff. I spent a good hour lugging it off the driveway this morning. So
yeah, me too.
Yeah. So yeah, happy spring.
Yeah, exactly. And that's actually this what just happened today. This snowstorm we were here in Nova Scotia is perfectly apropos for the title of today's episode. Perfectly, because we're talking about zone hardiness.
Yeah. And
the general issue we're going to deal with is zone. What are the growing zones? What are the planting zones? What does all of that mean? And in what ways can that be misleading in terms of planting dates and length of growing season and so on?
Yeah. I've often wondered which plants can actually survive.
Yeah. All right. So, the zone hardiness is about two main things, and I'm going to oversimplify here, but we've got like 15 minutes, so if you want to inform yourself on it, go on the internet and read all night.
Yeah, exactly. Google it.
I apologize to anyone who says, your definition wasn't technical enough.
Yeah.
Just the gist here.
Right.
Just the facts, man.
Yeah.
So, it's really going to determine two things. What plants can survive a winter in your area? We're talking about perennials here.
Yeah.
Or I suppose biennials as well. And anything that's going to come back the next year. And also what plants can grow to maturity in your geographic region. I'm talking about food here, right? This whole show is about food gardening. So it's like, okay, if I get it in the ground when it's warm, will it, bear its fruits,
Yeah.
by the time it freezes again, by the time the frost comes or whatever? Because a lot of the plants we like to grow and eat are tropical or subtropical. Tomatoes, tropical plant. So, this is not a tropical place. I'm looking out my window right now. It ain't tropical.
No, it is not.
So it's important to know, okay, when does the winter, how cold does the winter get, and that sort of thing. And that's based on the average annual minimum temperature in an area. So they pick these geographic regions that tend to, I don't know how they determine how they delineate them, decide what area defines them. I'm guessing it's something relative to elevation, latitude, and proximity to the coast, because those things affect temperatures, right? You get wind chills and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
They base it on the average annual minimum temperature. Okay, so for every year there's some coldest day.
Yeah.
Right? Because a certain kind of plant, it can survive minus 20. You can take it every day, but it can't survive minus 22.
Yeah.
One day of that is done.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So
yeah.
It's every year more data gets added to that database, and so on. And it's interesting to note too that they've all changed over the last, since the 60s. Like, if you knew, let's say you were very old and you knew what your zone was in the 60s, well, whatever it was, it's probably, like, if you were in zone 5 in the 60s, it's probably now zone 6.
Yeah. Well, there's no such thing as global warming, Greg.
That's right. Exactly.
Knock it off.
No, it's just magic making my watermelons bigger and my tomatoes redder.
Yes.
Nova Scotia, for instance, because we're in Nova Scotia, it's a very unique place because we're kind of a peninsula that juts out into the Gulf Stream.
Right.
And it's got the Bay of Fundy, and it's got the Northumberland Strait, and then it's got that Atlantic side where I am, which is like the worst part to be. Things.
Yeah.
Anyway, it ranges from 5A to 6B. If I look at, before I do that, I should say that there's a wonderful, to get a nice map of the plant hardiness zones in Canada. Sorry, Americans and people in Europe, but I'm going to speak to what I know here, and I'm in Canada.
Yeah.
You can go to www.planthardiness.gc.ca. It's a government website. We'll put a link in the show notes and in the description. But so it's got a nice little map there, and if I look at the one for Nova Scotia, it ranges. So Nova Scotia is very unique like that. It's a tiny place. It's not a big province, right? But it ranges from 5A to 6B, which is, pretty unique. So 6B would be down in the southwest, Yarmouth and that sort of bottom part, and then 5A would be around. Amherst and Cape Breton or whatever.
Right.
But we're going to talk more about this in a bit, but even that is unreliable. Well, in a bit. But if we look at those zones and a good deal of Canada, and when I say Canada, I'm speaking to where the majority of people live in Canada. Okay, so if you look at Canada, there's this thin ribbon along the border of the United States that is orange and yellow. The map has all these different colors that determine or identify the zones, right? As you get more and more yellow, it's getting into the 5s, and then orange is the 6s, and then orange red is the 7s, and red is 7, and pink and purple are 8, and that sort of thing, right? Yeah. So getting towards that color of the spectrum, you're getting more and more warm, and the parts of Canada where people live, where the population is clustered, right, which is basically along the border of the states. Right. That's the part of Canada where we're sort of 5A and warmer, with the exception of BC, which Victoria looks like it's on fire because the hotter zones is just bathed in the heat of the Pacific Ocean sort of thing. Yeah. It just looks like a different country pretty much on the western coast there. That's probably why they don't really have much of a winter. But anyway, looking at a place like Nova Scotia, it's so unique because it's got this huge range of temperatures, and it's such a small, you can drive across the province in 5 hours, and you can drive from the north side to the south side in about an hour, right? But you can experience a lot of ranges there. Anyway, so if we look at those zones, and a lot of places in Canada have their sort of zone 5A, 5B, 6A, 6B. Some of the colder provinces, population centers like maybe like Winnipeg, Manitoba, or Edmonton, Alberta, they're getting into the 4s and 3s, right? So it's a much more cold, intense winter sort of thing. But because they're further north, they have those insane days where there's like sunlight for 22 hours a day, stuff like that. Yeah. So that changes things. But if you look at just the zones between, so zone 5A, 5B, 6A, 6B. So zone 5A, the coldest it can get is between negative 30 and negative 26 degrees Celsius, which is negative 20, negative 15, respectively, in Fahrenheit. Whereas 6B goes from negative 21 to negative 18 degrees Celsius. So that's between 0 Fahrenheit and negative 5 Fahrenheit. So that's a fair amount of range within a small area like a small geographic area like this. But it's because it's so coastal, and it also has a lot of ranges in elevation for a small area. Right, we've got like how many ski slopes in the province? 4. Like we've got lots of swamps. It's a mountainous place. It's got plains, it's got valleys, and it's got that whole unique Annapolis Valley area where I used to live, which is just way better than where I'm living now. And from a growing point of view, it's just so much more. It's protected. It's buffeted from the North Atlantic. But anyway, the thing about you look at that chart and it'll give you a sense of where you are, right? But even then, you got to, it can be misleading. According to that table, I'm in zone 6, 6A or 6B. Yeah. And I would say if I go to downtown Halifax, that's 6A or 6B. But during the summer, I'm in people's gardens in the city. I'm 20 minutes from Halifax. And I'm much closer. I'm not in the. Halifax is really kind of like a valley if you think about it. And the harbor's the lowest point in that
Yeah.
valley.
Yeah.
And the harbor's protected. That's why, they brought sailing ships in there so they wouldn't get smashed to pieces on the rocks, right?
That's
It's
right.
protected.
Yeah.
Protected harbor, and it's a valley, and it's so that's 6A or maybe a 6B on a particular year. But where I am, I'm 230 feet above sea level. I'm about 6 kilometers from the Atlantic coast, like the raw
coastline.
If you can go down to the coast on a hot summer day, when in my backyard it's almost unbearable, and you go down there and you need a jacket.
Yeah.
It's cold, right? If you go down there mackerel fishing or something like that, I got to bring a coat or something like that because the wind is just flying, so it's you got to bear that in mind. So I determine my planting dates and all that sort of stuff. When I think about where I live, I consider myself to be in zone 5A, even though according to any charter map it says I'm in 6A.
Okay.
Right? But I've been here long enough to know that none of the suggestions for what to do for Zone 6A fits with the date of the year in my backyard. This does not.
Yeah.
So that's part of the thing about this episode is that you got to bear that in mind, right? And I'm at an elevation here where I get I have a unique microclimate because I'm sort of on a crest. It's the highest point, one of the higher points on the street. It's not protected in any way. There's no protection from the wind here. So in the winter, it gets really cold and the soil freezes. And I'll notice, I'll just drive 5 minutes from my house and people's tulips and all those, early plants, they're all up and mine aren't. And the ground's still frozen. I'll be talking to a neighbor and I notice their flower garden is thawed and mine's still frozen.
Yeah.
So that's all stuff you have to be aware of, and you just have to get to know your area and adjust your expectation and your schedule accordingly.
Yeah.
That's not all there is to it because, the hardiness zones, they're informative for you in terms of making decisions of what perennials to buy.
Right.
If you're in a zone 5A, then, if you buy something that's hardy to zone 8, you're going to have to buy it every year because it's going to die every winter unless you do a few things to fool it into think it's in a warmer zone.
Right.
Talk about that towards the end of the episode.
Yeah.
So it's good for that. But where it's not good for is that they don't account for summer heat levels. So for instance, Halifax and Toronto are both zone 6A. But if you're in Halifax in the late July, right? You can sit on someone's back deck and have a few beers, and if you're outside in late July in Toronto, it's hot.
Yeah.
I was just there last year. It was unbelievably hot. I couldn't believe
how hot it was.
We were in some lineup in downtown Toronto. I told my wife I had to go. I snuck into a store somewhere and pretended to be shopping because I collapsed from the heat.
Yeah.
It is hot there.
Oh, we got that nice sea breeze here that we take for granted.
Yeah, it just regulates things, right?
Yeah.
It's
pretty similar inland in New Brunswick as well, like Fredericton.
Oh, Fredericton, man, is hot.
Yeah,
it
hot in the
reminds
summer.
me of Southern Ontario.
Yeah.
Summer.
Yeah.
So, the hardiness zones, they don't give you any information with regard to that. Right? That's just something you have to be aware of and understand. So, in Toronto, you can grow watermelons and things like that. It's a better place for growing corn. It's better for things like that because it just gets so much hotter. Even the contrast between where I live in the valley, for instance, I used to grow corn in my backyard when I was in the valley. It was awesome. I've only had 1 year where I grew corn well here, and every other year it's been kind of pathetic and stunted because it's just so much colder here. And then that year was an incredible year. That was I think it was the summer of 2013.
Yeah.
Maybe the summer of 2014. I had my whole garden was a month ahead of where it typically is at any given point in time.
Oh, wow.
So we had just a great year. But normally, and I thought that was hey, because I just moved here, right? So everything's going to be like this from now.
Right.
But that's like that sense. It's been like, so I've had to adjust my expectations. But that's the catch with, the zones. So you got to just learn to, like the dirty Harry quote, a man's got to know his limitations.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm starting. There's a lot of things I used to like to grow, and now I got to find varieties that just grow faster.
Yeah.
Or plant things that just have to plant different things. And, I used to love to grow these big high beans and stuff like that. And now I'm finding I'm using a lot more bush varieties because it's just a different game here.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Now, what was the last thing we were talking about? How to extend your season. So,
right.
I mean, there's tricks you can do. I don't tend to do a lot of them because I like things to be really simple. I grow a lot more root vegetables because they do good in cold regions, and you can store them in the garage and that sort of thing. But if you want to have an extra month of kale or an extra month of Swiss chard or spinach or whatever, right? If you want to extend your season, options like cold frames and hoop houses and greenhouses, those are options and they can work. And the rule of thumb is every layer of protection will buy you another zone. So if I build a cold frame, it would turn my zone 5A into zone 6A. Mm-hmm. But then if I built let's say I put a hoop house over the cold frame, and then it would turn my artificial zone 6A into zone 7A. And if I put like a greenhouse over that, you've got like these air spaces in between these layers of plaster, glass or whatever, right? And I mean, adding insulation and everything you can do to insulate and capture the sun's heat and that sort of stuff. Right. So you can conceivably get to a state where you have things growing in the winter, but you're going to have to just one layer of plastic isn't going to get you there. You're going to have to get more elaborate and that sort of thing. So that's all depends on how much money you want to lay out for that sort of thing, and how creative you are with your designs, and how much of that you want in your garden. I sort of like things being sort of open, and I don't like having too much plastic and equipment and monstrosities in my garden, although I do desire what they offer in terms of productivity. Right. But anyway, it's probably another topic, another episode. Okay. So that's one thing. Now about survivability, let's say like I've got rosemary growing in the garden next to my house here, and it's a zone 8. The variety I bought, which is just what was at the store the day I bought it. Yeah. I didn't realize till after I got home and planted it when I was like ripping the tag off. It's like, zone 8. Why are they even selling that here? Yeah. Not gonna I want to buy this once and never buy it again. Right. So what I do with stuff like that, where I think I can probably, is to insulate. Okay. Right. So what I do with the rosemary is I just fill a bag up with hay and leaves and things like that, so something insulative, and just throw a bag of that. You could even throw a bale of hay, but anyway, just throw a big pile of stuff on top of it, in around November, and just leave it like that, and you pull that off in April, right? And you never know what's going to happen. You got to be aware of microclimates. Like there's this wonderful variety of sort of fake coriander that I like called Vietnamese coriander. And there's a lady downtown, I work on her garden, and I put some in for her 2 years ago. And this year when I was in her garden in the spring, just getting everything ready, I noticed it was growing. And it's a zone 11. You mean it was still wintertime? No, it was like, let's say May. It was like
last May. So
I came back the following year in May, and it was growing out of the ground. Uh-huh. And I mean, this is a zone 11 plant. So zone 11, the coldest it gets is like 4 degrees Celsius. That's like the coldest day of the year ever, is 4 degrees Celsius. So, I mean, this was a garden where, it took a Canadian winter in Halifax. It was definitely colder than 4 degrees Celsius there. Yeah. But because it's on a side of a house facing south, it must be just unique. Yeah. Probably doesn't get a lot of wind, and the sun reflects off. I remember when I built the garden for her, I got her to let me paint the foundation of the house black so it would capture heat. Right. So whatever we did there, and the wood chips and all that other magical stuff, you created them for whatever reason. The soil where that plant's roots are didn't get below that temperature because it was still growing. Now, I planted the same thing in my garden the year before. That was back then, and it died. It did not make it. Now, last year I had one in my herb garden, and I covered it with a big bag of hay, so we'll see. I know I can get a Zone 8 plant to take my Zone 5A conditions. And come back the next year. Can I get a Zone 11 plant? Maybe I should have put 2 bags of hay on top or something like that. And it's also useful, if you have a bag of hay or some old onion bag like that, fill it full of like hay and maybe manure or something like that. So every time it rains, it's going to leach nutrients into the soil. So you're sort of doing 2 things at once, making it easier on yourself, right? Nice. You're fertilizing and you're saving. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm trying to save myself $2.99.
Not everybody's interested in doing that.
No, but I mean, I spent 1 minute filling a bag full of stuff and I threw it on there. So it's
money well spent.
You make $2.99 a minute, you're doing good.
Yeah, that's actually true. That's actually true. If you could just do that every minute of the day.
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, cool.
So just some thoughts on hardiness zones, and so you look at the map and it says you're this. You may be able to do all the things a chart or table says you can do in that zone, but you may not. And because you can't do those things in the zone, it doesn't mean doesn't necessarily mean your soil's no good, or you don't know what you're doing, or the seeds weren't viable. I have had seasons where I've planted my squash, and squash is a very tender plant. It's a heat-loving plant. I've had seasons where I planted my squash, and the seeds have rotted and died. And I planted it when the charts and tables said I should for this zone. And then I planted them again, and they rotted and died. And then I planted them again, and it wasn't until the solstice, like July, late June, wasn't until the summer solstice that I had a seed germinate in the soil. I could have given up because I planted it. The table said to plant 3 weeks ahead of that.
Yeah.
And it kept dying and dying and dying. So I could have thought, well, these seeds must be no good, or maybe I don't know what I'm doing, or maybe there's some virus in my soil, or no, it's nothing like that. Just where I am in this place, the soil was not warm enough for germinating that seed.
Wow.
So
interesting.
Worth there's lots of things to consider when you're learning to grow plants, and your hardiness zone and the unique growing conditions that are where you are, very important. That's why in the last episode we were talking about being aware of all these different indications, these different what blooms in your area and that sort of thing.
Cool.
So, and further to that, something we were talking about last week, which is connected to what we're talking about this week. I'm doing a little bit of series on, what to plant, when to plant, and how to know when to do that. That's why we're talking about zones today. Last episode, I was talking about, looking for indications in your microclimate. What's blooming, what's growing, what's happening at various times of the year, and timing your plantings relative to that. I gave the example of the spring peepers, and I don't know if it was last episode or one before that. Anyway, one of the listeners wrote in and gave me a list of things that I don't think I'd heard of any of these. So the advice was that you plant corn and beans when apple blossoms begin to fade. So you gotta have an apple tree.
Yeah.
Also, I think that would depend on the variety of apple as well. But still, I'm going to be watching my apple trees this year. And see when I think I should plant my beans, because, big fan of beans. Plant tomatoes, early corn, and peppers when dogwoods are in peak bloom. I don't think I have any of those in my backyard. But still, it's just one thing to add to your list of, things to look for. Plant cucumbers and squash when lilac flowers fade.
Yeah.
I don't have any, but maybe one of my neighbors does. That's a good one, because that's like, as the example I was just giving before, it's, you don't want to waste. You want to plant them when it's the right time. They're very sensitive to cold soil. Start succession planting of beets and carrots when dandelions are blooming. That's a good one. Everyone's got those.
Yeah.
I'll be watching for that.
Yeah.
I tend to plant my carrots right, really one of the first things I plant.
Yeah.
And plant peas when forsythia blooms. I used to have that in my last property.
Yeah.
So that's a good one to know.
Cool. Yeah, that was from Sue Gilmore. So thanks, Sue, for that comment and the advice.
Add that to the database of natural indicators of planting times.
Yeah.
I'd like to build like a huge chart, like everything in charts and tables. I'd love to build a huge table of all of those planting times and all those different traditional indicators of what to do and when to do it.
That'd be great. That would be great. Very good. All right. So that does wrap up this being episode 30, which you can find the show notes for at maritimegardening.com/030. And I just want to take a minute and thank everybody for listening and just put a little request out that if you do enjoy the show, and I'm assuming if you're tuning in to multiple episodes, or maybe you've listened to them all, that perhaps you do, it would really help the show out if you would take a minute and give us a positive rating on iTunes, if you can do that for us. Another thing is make sure that you subscribe to our email newsletter, and you can do that just by going to maritimegardening.com, and eventually when you're looking around the site, a little pop-up box will come up, or on the right-hand side, you can just put your email address in there, and you'll get on our email newsletter. That pretty well does it for this one. Thanks again for listening. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you. Thanks for listening.
And we'll catch you on episode 31. Take care. Bye-bye.